Yellow Vest protesters have stormed the Attorney General's office while chanting Anna Sabri is a Nazi and called for a meeting over the deaths of 3 teenage boys. Demonstrators live-streamed the protest as they occupied a stairwell of the building near Westminster Abbey. Police officers arrived at the offices shortly after, as the activists chanted "We want a new Attorney General" and "Shame on you" as officers surrounded them and the fire alarm continued to ring out. They claimed that their calls for a meeting over the deaths of 3 teenage boys have been ignored. The protest related to the case of Jansh Chedasama, who was jailed last year over the deaths by dangerous driving of 3 boys as they walked to a 16th birthday party. The car hire worker was more than 2.5 times the legal limit for alcohol and doing 71 miles per hour on a 60 miles per hour road in Hayes, West London, when he ploughed into the teenagers. He pleaded guilty to causing the death by dangerous driving of semi-professional footballer Harry Rice, 17, apprentice electrician George Wilkinson, 16, and labourer Josh McGuinness, 16. He subsequently had his 13-year prison term cut to 10.5 years by 3 judges at the Court of Appeal in London. Protesters at the Attorney General's office sang "Justice for the 3" and chanted "We want a new Attorney General," while one man held an England flag aloft. Police were called to the scene but no arrests were made. The group included some people who spent the morning at Westminster Magistrates Court where self-styled Yellow Vests protester James Goddard denied harassing pro-Remain MP Anna Sabri. It comes after a court hearing over an allegation that Tommy Robinson committed contempt of court was postponed. Attorney General Geoffrey Cox QC announced earlier this month that it was in the public interest to bring proceedings against the former English Defence League (EDL) leader, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Meanwhile, the protesters knocked on an office door within the building, shouting, "Hello, the little people are here." They eventually left around an hour later after being threatened with arrest, but vowed, "We'll be back." One 63-year-old man from South London, who did not want to give his name, said, "We are not far right. We are a peaceful movement. We have our views on politics which we're entitled to have." He said they will march to Parliament later to demand Brexit. He added that Tracy Blackwell, mother of Josh, had written to and called the Attorney General's office to speak about the case but had been ignored. Asked what the point of their protest was, he said, "Justice for Tracy." A number of protesters refused to move when asked by police, telling the officers, "No violence." Ms. Blackwell was applauded as she emerged from the building. She said she had asked for a meeting with the Attorney General but had been refused. Ms. Blackwell said, "They just ignore the working class and that's what it's about." The protesters left the building and began chanting, "We'll see you next week." Hours earlier, there were chaotic scenes at Westminster Magistrates Court as Goddard and his supporters repeatedly interrupted proceedings, which ended with activists bellowing "Shame on you" at the judge. The 29-year-old is accused of harassing MP Anna Sabri, 62, calling her a Nazi and traitor outside the Houses of Parliament. At one point, Goddard shouted over his solicitor as he spoke in court, claiming, "It is not illegal to call, to heckle an MP." It says so in the defense statement. How is calling her a Nazi threatening? I get called a far-right fascist. At this, his supporters broke out into chants of "Anna Sabri is a Nazi," prompting the judge to leave court. Mr. Grant Rosen temporarily adjourned the case 15 minutes into the hearing after people in the public gallery began shouting about Brexit. The case resumed briefly to inform Goddard of his bail conditions, but descended into farce again as the defendant left the dock to address the judge. In between the moments of chaos, the self-styled Yellow Vest protester found time to plead not guilty to calling an MP a Nazi and a traitor outside Parliament. James Goddard, 29, denied harassing 62-year-old Anna Sabri, who left the Conservatives to join the independent group last month, between December 18 last year and January 8. The charge states that Goddard, from Timperley, Greater Manchester, shouted and chanted at the MP, a prominent backer of a second EU referendum, while broadcasters were interviewing her. Goddard is also said to have pursued Miss Sabri along the street, demanding she answer questions, filmed her on his mobile phone, and called her a Nazi, a traitor and scum, along with using other rude and insulting language. At Westminster Magistrates' Court this morning, Goddard also denied one count of racially aggravated harassment, alarm, or distress, and another count of harassment, alarm, or distress. Goddard, wearing a white t-shirt featuring a British flag, a logo for the Directory Guys, a motif of 3 children's faces, and the words "Our Boys," used his mobile phone in the dock as he waited for the case to begin. He briefly left the courtroom before the hearing started to talk with his solicitor after a member of the public shouted legal advice from the packed public gallery, where several of his supporters were sat on the floor. Goddard asked why, when told to stand for the charges to be read, and gave his nationality as English, but refused to give his address due to the vultures in court. As Goddard sat in the dock, one supporter urged him to sack his lawyer from the public gallery, yelling, "James, sack him on the spot," and then they have to adjourn it to applause from others. District Judge Kenneth Grant said, in relation to the defense case, "Is it fair opinion, reasonable behavior, or fair comment?"